Armed drones were 4 minutes from destroying downtown Denver, carrying enough missiles to blow up entire city blocks. The Air Force had no jets close enough, except one. Their only option was a woman sitting in economy class on Flight 237. Earbuds in. Joggers on. They ordered, "Get her in that F-22. Before you watch full story, comment below from which country are you watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more amazing stories. It was a Saturday. March 11, 2017. A cold morning in Boston, with thin clouds sitting low over the city and a sharp wind coming off the harbor. Boston Logan International Airport was already busy by 9 in the morning. Spring break had started for most schools and colleges across the Northeast, and the terminal was full of families dragging heavy bags, young people in groups looking at their phones, and business travelers walking fast with coffee cups in their hands. Gate B-22 was one of the busier gates that morning. JetBlue Flight 237 was scheduled to depart at 10:15, bound for San Diego, California. The aircraft was an Airbus A321, fully loaded with 187 passengers. Crew members stood at the gate, scanning boarding passes as the line moved forward in the slow and shuffling way that boarding lines always do. Nobody was in any particular mood to talk to strangers. It was too early, and the flight was too long, and everyone just wanted to get to their seat and settle in. Among the 187 passengers who boarded that aircraft, there was a woman who drew no attention at all. She was somewhere in economy class, not near the front and not near the back, just somewhere in the middle where people rarely look at each other. She appeared to be in her late 20s, around 27 or 28 years old. She was average height, and while she had an athletic build, there was nothing dramatic about the way she carried herself. Her dark hair was cut short in a simple and practical style, not styled at all. She wore no makeup. Her clothes were as plain as everything else about her. Black joggers. A gray Nike pullover. Clean white running shoes. She had a small backpack, which she put in the overhead bin without any trouble, and then she sat down, plugged her earbuds in, leaned her head back against the seat, and closed her eyes before the boarding door had even been shut. She looked like a graduate student going home for spring break. She could have been a personal trainer on a short vacation. She could have been any ordinary young woman on any ordinary flight going anywhere. There was nothing about her that made you look twice. She had the easy and quiet presence of someone who had learned, over many years, how to disappear in plain sight. Nobody noticed her. Nobody wondered about her. She was simply another face in a full aircraft, completely forgettable in every way. Her name was Captain Jordan Hayes. She was 28 years old. Her boarding pass said Jordan Hayes. Her listed occupation on every form she filled out for public purposes said consultant. Her official address was in Virginia Beach, Virginia. None of those things were lies. But none of them came anywhere close to telling the true story of who she was or what she did. What nobody on JetBlue Flight 237 knew, not the passengers around her, not the flight attendants preparing the galley, not Captain Luis Garcia sitting in the left seat of the cockpit, was that Captain Jordan Hayes was one of the most skilled and decorated military pilots in the entire United States Armed Forces. She was not a consultant. She was an active duty officer in the United States Air Force, assigned to the 27th Fighter Squadron of the 1st Fighter Wing at Langley Air Force Base in Virginia. Her aircraft was the F-22 Raptor. The F-22 was not just a fighter jet. It was the most advanced air superiority aircraft ever built. It was a 5th-generation stealth fighter, capable of speeds exceeding Mach 2, equipped with avionics and sensor systems and radar-evading technology that nothing else in the world could match. Fewer than 150 pilots in the entire United States military were cleared to fly it at any given time. Getting to that level required years of exceptional performance, elite training, and a kind of mental toughness that most people never develop. Jordan Hayes had all of it and then some. She had graduated from the United States Air Force Academy in 2011, finishing in the top 5% of her entire graduating class. From there she went directly into undergraduate pilot training, where she graduated number 1 out of everyone in her class. Not near the top. Number 1. She then moved into fighter fundamentals training in T-38 Talon jets, where instructors took notice of her calm and precise flying style and the way she absorbed new information faster than anyone around her. After that, she was selected for F-22 conversion training, which is exactly as difficult and demanding as it sounds. By the time she boarded that JetBlue flight in Boston, Jordan had been flying the F-22 Raptor for 6 years. She had logged 1,847 total flight hours, including 687 hours specifically in the F-22. She had flown 47 real-world intercept missions. Not training exercises. Not simulations. Real missions, where she climbed into an armed aircraft and responded to real threats in real American airspace. Russian long-range bombers probing the edges of U.S. air defense boundaries. Chinese surveillance aircraft detected near Guam. Unidentified aircraft violating restricted zones over sensitive locations. Every time, Jordan had been among the pilots sent up to find them, get eyes on them, and respond according to the rules of engagement. She had earned her call sign during Red Flag exercises in Nevada. Red Flag was held at Nellis Air Force Base and was the most demanding and realistic combat training program the Air Force ran. It was designed to simulate actual aerial combat against skilled and equipped opponents. During those exercises, Jordan flew in a way that left the pilots opposing her completely unable to figure out where she was going to come from next. She would appear from angles that seemed impossible given her last known position. She would disappear from radar before anyone could get a lock on her. She would attack from directions that made no sense until after the engagement was already over. The instructors and senior pilots watching the exercises from the ground said the same thing, in different words, every time. They said she was like fighting something that was not there. Like going up against a ghost. Like chasing a phantom. The name stuck immediately, and she wore it on her flight suit for the rest of her career. Phantom. Beyond her standard flying duties, Jordan had been selected for a classified test pilot program, where she evaluated next-generation avionics upgrades and advanced weapons integration systems being developed for the F-22 fleet. This work took her into secured hangars and onto flight lines that most military pilots never saw. She flew aircraft variants that did not officially exist yet. She wrote technical reports that went directly to program offices and from there to people with enough clearance to read them. She was, in every sense that mattered, one of the most operationally valuable military pilots in the country. And she was exhausted. It had been nearly 2 years since Jordan had taken any real time away from work. 23 months of flying and testing and briefing and debriefing and being available at all hours. 23 months of short nights and early mornings and weekends that disappeared before she noticed they had come. Her sister lived in San Diego and had just given birth to her first child, a boy. Jordan had not met him yet. She had requested leave specifically for this trip, and the leave had been approved after what seemed like a very long time. She had taken it. Real leave. The first real leave in almost 2 years. She was going to San Diego to meet her nephew, sleep in a real bed that was not on a military base, eat food that came from an actual kitchen, and spend a few days simply being a person instead of an officer. She was not Captain Hayes on that plane. She was not Phantom. She was just Jordan. A tired young woman with her earbuds in, trying to sleep before the aircraft even finished climbing to cruising altitude. She was so close to actually relaxing. She was almost there. The aircraft was 2 hours into its flight. They were cruising at 38,000 feet over the wide, flat landscape of Kansas. The sun was high outside the windows. The cabin had settled into the quiet rhythm of long flights. Most of the overhead reading lights were off. The in-flight entertainment screens glowed in the slightly dim interior. A few passengers typed on laptops. Most were sleeping or close to it. Jordan was sleeping, her head resting against the seat back, completely still. Her phone vibrated. She opened her eyes slowly. She reached down and looked at the screen. The phone she carried was not a standard commercial device. It was a government-issued unit with satellite communication capability built into it, which meant it could receive priority military transmissions regardless of where she was. In the air. In the field. Anywhere. The incoming message was encrypted and had come from her squadron commander at Langley Air Force Base. The message read, "Priority alert. National security emergency developing. Stand by for possible recall. Do not acknowledge. Monitoring your location." Jordan sat up straight. Her eyes were fully open and completely alert. The tiredness was gone, replaced immediately by the sharp and focused attention that years of training had made automatic. She looked around the cabin. Nobody near her had noticed anything. The man across the aisle was asleep with a magazine on his lap. The couple in front of her were watching a movie. Everything around her was completely normal. A second message arrived. It read, "Unidentified aircraft penetrating United States airspace over eastern Colorado. Multiple bogeys. Not responding to communications on any frequency. Course indicates threat to Denver metropolitan area. All available F-22s scrambling. Your location is being tracked. Stand by." Jordan felt her pulse increase. She understood the situation immediately. The Air Force had scrambled every F-22 it could reach from nearby bases, but the geography of the problem, the exact position of the threat, the available aircraft, and the time left before those unidentified aircraft reached a populated area had brought her into the picture. She was on a commercial flight crossing the country, and military tracking systems knew exactly where she was and exactly who she was. She was, at that precise moment, the closest F-22 qualified pilot to the emergency developing over Colorado. The third message came before she had finished processing the second one. It read, "Captain Hayes, emergency authorization granted. You will be vectored to Peterson Air Force Base, Colorado Springs. Aircraft is being prepped and waiting. You are being activated immediately. Acknowledge." Jordan typed 2 words back. Acknowledged. Standing by. She stood from her seat and moved forward through the cabin. She walked at a normal pace, not rushing, not drawing attention. The forward galley had 2 flight attendants in it. She approached the one closest to the cockpit door, a young man whose name tag read Marcus. He had the relaxed and friendly posture of someone midway through an uneventful flight. Jordan spoke to him quietly. She said, "Excuse me. I need to speak to the captain right now. This is a national security matter." Marcus gave her the polite but slightly apologetic look that flight attendants give when a passenger asks for something that is outside normal procedure. He said, "Ma'am, I understand, but I really cannot bring a passenger into the flight deck without a very specific reason. I can pass a message to the captain if you'd like." Jordan had already reached into her bag and taken out her military identification card. She held it in front of Marcus clearly enough for him to read every word on it. His expression shifted. His posture changed. The polite apology in his eyes became something else entirely. She said, "Captain Jordan Hayes, United States Air Force. I need to speak to Captain Garcia right now. This is not a request." Marcus said, "Yes ma'am. Please follow me." The cockpit of the A321 was calm and lit in the cool, steady way of a well-managed flight deck. Captain Luis Garcia was 51 years old and had spent 17,000 hours in commercial cockpits across a long and distinguished career. First Officer Amy Chen, 34 years old, had 6,800 hours of her own. They were an experienced and well-matched crew, comfortable working together. When the flight deck door opened and Marcus stepped in followed by a young woman in gray athletic wear, both pilots turned from their instruments with polite curiosity. Garcia said, "Can I help you?" Jordan stepped forward and held up her military ID card. She spoke in a clear and direct voice and gave them exactly what they needed to understand the situation, without any extra words. "Captain Garcia. My name is Captain Jordan Hayes. I am a United States Air Force officer, assigned to the 27th Fighter Squadron at Langley Air Force Base. I fly F-22 Raptors. I have just received emergency military orders. There is a national security situation developing over Colorado right now. I am being recalled to active duty. I need you to divert this aircraft to Peterson Air Force Base in Colorado Springs immediately." Garcia looked at her. He looked at the ID card. He looked back at her face. He said nothing for a moment. First Officer Chen said, "We are a commercial airliner with 187 passengers aboard. We cannot simply divert the aircraft because someone claiming to be." Jordan's phone rang. She answered it, listened for 1 second, and said, "Yes sir, I'm patching you through now." She held the phone out toward Garcia. "Captain Garcia, the caller is General Michael Torres, North American Aerospace Defense Command. He wants to speak to you personally." Garcia hesitated for just 1 second. Then he took the phone. The voice that came from it was calm, deep, and absolutely certain of itself. "Captain Garcia, this is General Michael Torres, NORAD. I am going to make this brief because time is a factor. You have a United States Air Force officer on your aircraft who has been recalled under emergency military authority. The situation developing over Colorado is real and it is serious. I need you to divert JetBlue Flight 237 to Peterson Air Force Base in Colorado Springs right now. This is being executed under Emergency Protocol Zulu 7. You and your airline will receive full legal protection. Your passengers will be accommodated and compensated. But I need you to begin your diversion this moment. Do you copy?" Garcia's hand holding the phone was perfectly still. His eyes were fixed somewhere beyond the front windows of the aircraft, looking at nothing in particular. After a brief silence he said, in a very steady voice, "I copy, General. Diverting now." He handed the phone back to Jordan. He turned to First Officer Chen, who was already looking at the navigation display. He keyed his radio. "Denver Center, JetBlue 237, we are declaring an emergency and diverting to Peterson Air Force Base under military orders. We request immediate vectors and priority handling for all traffic." There was a short pause on the frequency, the kind of pause that air traffic controllers sometimes need when something arrives that they have never heard before in however many years they have been working. Then the controller's voice came back. "JetBlue 237, Roger. Cleared direct Peterson. Descend and maintain 15,000. All traffic is being cleared out of your way. Military escort will join your aircraft in approximately 3 minutes." Garcia switched to the cabin PA system. He drew a slow breath, then pressed the button and spoke in the deliberate and calm way that airline captains are trained to communicate with passengers during unexpected situations. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Garcia speaking from the flight deck. We are diverting to Peterson Air Force Base in Colorado Springs due to a military emergency. I want to be very clear with you. There is nothing wrong with this aircraft. Our aircraft is in perfect condition. This diversion is related to a national security matter that I am not able to describe in detail at this time. We will be on the ground in approximately 15 minutes. Please remain calm and remain in your seats. Thank you." The cabin erupted. It was not a panic exactly, but it was loud and immediate and full of the anxious confusion that spreads through a crowd when something completely outside normal experience happens and nobody has enough information to understand it. Passengers who had been sleeping woke up instantly. People pulled out their phones and began typing. Someone toward the back of the aircraft shouted, "Are we being hijacked?" Someone else said, "What does military emergency mean? What is happening?" A small child somewhere behind row 20 began crying loudly. Flight attendants moved through the aisles trying to calm people, but reassurance is a difficult thing to offer when you do not fully understand the situation yourself. The noise in the cabin climbed rapidly. Jordan came back through the cockpit door and walked into the main cabin. She did not rush. She did not raise her voice in a panicked way. She positioned herself in the aisle near the front, where most of the forward passengers could see her, and she spoke in a voice that was loud enough to carry from front to back but controlled enough to communicate that she was not frightened, not confused, and not worried about her own safety or theirs. "Everyone, please listen to me for just one moment," she said. "My name is Captain Jordan Hayes. I am an active duty officer in the United States Air Force. There is no threat to this aircraft. There is no mechanical problem with this plane. There is a national security situation developing over Colorado that requires me to report for duty immediately. This aircraft is diverting to Peterson Air Force Base so that I can get to my assigned fighter aircraft. Every single one of you is completely safe. This will take approximately 30 minutes of your time, and after that, this aircraft will continue to San Diego, and you will all reach your destination. I apologize for the disruption." The cabin was quiet for a moment. Long enough for the hum of the engines to be clearly audible. Then a man in a business suit somewhere in the middle of the cabin rose partially from his seat and said, loudly enough for many rows to hear, "You honestly expect us to believe you are a fighter pilot? You are wearing joggers. You look like you just came from a yoga class." Jordan opened her mouth to respond. She never got the chance. The sound hit the aircraft before anything visual happened. It was a deep, physical roar that came from outside the fuselage and vibrated through the floor and the walls and the overhead bins. Several passengers gasped audibly. The ones seated on the left side of the aircraft turned sharply toward the windows. The ones on the right side stood from their seats and craned their necks trying to see. What they saw outside the windows of JetBlue Flight 237, flying in tight and perfect formation with their angular wings no more than 50 feet from the wingtips of the Airbus, were two F-22 Raptors. They were enormous and completely unlike anything most of the passengers had ever seen up close. The angular lines of their stealth airframes caught the afternoon sunlight in sharp geometric patterns. Their engines produced a sound and a physical presence that passengers felt in their chests even through the pressurized fuselage of the commercial jet. They flew with a smooth and unhurried precision that said everything about the skill of the pilots handling them. The entire cabin fell silent. Every face was pressed against a window or turned toward one. Nobody said a word. The sight of two of the most advanced fighter jets ever built, flying escort formation alongside a JetBlue commercial flight over the middle of Kansas, was so completely impossible and so spectacular that it momentarily erased every other thought in every mind in the cabin. Then one of the F-22s moved. It banked gently away from the Airbus, creating a little separation, and then it rolled. Smoothly, deliberately, with complete control, it executed a full 360-degree barrel roll, rotating once around its own axis, and then returned to its original position alongside the commercial aircraft. It was a specific maneuver with a specific meaning in military aviation. When one pilot rolls their aircraft alongside another, it is a salute. It is one pilot saying, without words, that they recognize and honor the person in the other cockpit. The pilot of that F-22, whoever was in that aircraft, had just rolled his jet to honor the woman sitting in economy class in gray joggers who was about to come out and fly. The businessman sat back down very slowly. He did not say another word for the rest of the flight. The approach into Peterson Air Force Base took 14 minutes from the time Garcia initiated his descent. The runway at Peterson was wide and long, built for military aircraft and more than capable of handling an Airbus A321. The jet rolled out cleanly and turned off onto a secure taxiway that led to a cordoned military ramp area. Before the aircraft had come to a complete stop, vehicles were already approaching. Military police trucks. A Humvee with an amber light running on its roof. Two Air Force officers in flight suits jogging toward the aircraft. A set of air stairs was pushed into position and the forward door was opened. Jordan was already standing at the door. She stepped through it into the cold Colorado air. The contrast between the pressurized warmth of the cabin and the sharp March wind at Peterson's elevation hit her immediately. She walked down the stairs and the two officers who had been jogging toward the aircraft were at the bottom waiting for her. One of them spoke immediately. "Captain Hayes. We have a situation and we need you right now. Your aircraft is prepped and fueled and waiting. Command has been on the radio every 30 seconds asking for an ETA. Let's go, ma'am." The other officer was already on his radio as they moved. His voice was tight and fast. "This is Lieutenant Reyes at the ramp. I have Captain Hayes. Repeat, I have Captain Hayes in hand. Tell General Torres she is en route to the aircraft now." He paused, listening. Then he spoke again. "Yes sir, passing that along." He looked at Jordan while they walked. "General Torres's exact words, ma'am. He said get her in that F-22 and get her airborne in 5 minutes or we lose the intercept window." Jordan said, "I'll be airborne in 4. They moved at speed across the ramp in the Humvee. The base was in motion around them. Ground personnel were moving with the fast and purposeful urgency of an installation responding to an actual emergency. Radios crackled. Vehicles moved. The sounds of aircraft engines were in the air from multiple directions. Someone in the back seat of the Humvee handed Jordan a flight suit and she pulled it on over her joggers without slowing down, working the zipper and adjusting the collar and securing the leg fasteners while the vehicle was still moving. Someone else handed her a helmet bag. A third person handed her a single laminated card with the current tactical picture printed on it. She read it in the time it took the Humvee to cross from the ramp entrance to the fighter parking line. 4 unidentified aircraft. Eastern Colorado. Heading south toward Denver. Not responding to any communication. Altitude varying between 15,000 and 22,000 feet. Estimated time to Denver metropolitan area was less than 8 minutes from when the card had been printed. The F-22 was on the ramp with its engines already running. The canopy was open. Ground crews surrounded it in the practiced and quick-moving way of people who had done this many times. The low, building whine of the aircraft's power plant was audible and physical from 30 yards away. Jordan got out of the Humvee while it was still slowing down, crossed the remaining distance to the boarding ladder at a run, and climbed into the cockpit with the quick and automatic motion of someone who had done this exact thing hundreds of times before. The crew chief helped her connect her harness fittings, her oxygen mask, her communication leads. She ran through a compressed pre-taxi check, going through every critical item at the speed the situation demanded, which was fast. Every item was confirmed. Every system came back ready. The ground crew descended and the boarding ladder was pulled away. The tower was already talking to her before she had finished closing the canopy. Phantom, Peterson Tower. You are cleared for immediate takeoff on runway 35. Winds from the north at 12 knots. Turn right heading 030 on departure and climb unrestricted to flight level 450. NORAD picture is 4 bogies at your 12 o'clock, 138 miles. Altitude varying. Heading south toward Denver Metro. They are not communicating on any frequency. You are cleared weapons hot. Rules of engagement are identify and intercept visually. Weapons employment requires my explicit authorization. Acknowledge. Jordan said, Phantom copies all. Rolling now. She advanced the throttles. The F-22 rolled forward and she taxied to the runway threshold without stopping. The clearance was already given and every second was a second of airspace those unknown aircraft were crossing. She lined up on the centerline, took one breath, and pushed the throttles forward to military power and then into afterburner. The acceleration was immediate and enormous. The aircraft went from a standstill to rotation speed in a distance that seemed too short for something that large, and Jordan pulled back on the stick and the wheels left the ground and the nose pointed up at an angle that looked aggressive from the ground. She raised the landing gear immediately and continued to pull, climbing at a rate that no commercial aircraft could approach, the afterburners pushing a column of superheated exhaust behind her as the F-22 traded airspeed for altitude at an extraordinary rate. She was supersonic before she had cleared the Colorado Springs area. At 45,000 feet the world below was a wide quilt of brown and gray. The sky above was the deep blue that approaches the color of space. Jordan leveled off and pushed the aircraft to Mach 1.8, settling into the smooth and locked-in feeling of sustained supersonic flight. Her radar was already working. The contacts built themselves on her display, for distinct tracks, their position, altitude, and heading all painting a clear picture of what was happening below. She keyed her radio. Control, Phantom is supersonic at flight level 450. Radar contact on 4 bogies. Estimated intercept in approximately 9 minutes. Control responded. Phantom, still no communications from the contacts. NORAD wants a visual ID before any action. Confirm you copy. Phantom copies. Going in for ID. She descended slightly and maneuvered to approach from above and behind the contacts, using the F-22's stealth characteristics to close the distance without being detected. Her radar warning receiver, which would alert her if anything on the ground or in the air was tracking her with radar, was completely silent during the entire approach. The 4 contacts had no radar of their own that was scanning for threats. They were flying straight and steady, holding to their programmed course and speed, completely unaware that an F-22 was descending toward them from above. At 12 miles, she had visual acquisition. They were below her and forward, moving at a relatively slow airspeed compared to a manned fighter aircraft. She moved into a trail position above and behind the lead contact and descended further to get alongside it. At close range, she could see the airframe clearly. They were unmanned aerial vehicles. Large ones. The configuration and size matched the MQ-9 Reaper, a military-grade drone with a wingspan of approximately 66 feet and the structural capacity to carry significant weapons payloads. These 4 carried no identifying markings of any kind. No country codes. No serial numbers. No operator insignia. The airframes were clean of any unit identification. But the weapon's pylons beneath the wings were not clean. Jordan maneuvered to within 500 feet of the lead drone and looked carefully at what was attached to those pylons. She recognized the profile immediately. The seeker heads at the front. The cylindrical rocket motor casings. The warhead sections. She had been briefed on these weapons many times and she knew exactly what she was looking at. AGM-114 Hellfire missiles. At least 6 of them distributed among the 4 aircraft. She moved back to a safe engagement distance and keyed her radio. Her voice was controlled, professional, and direct. Control, Phantom has eyes on 4 UAVs. Approximate MQ-9 Reaper class. 0 identifying markings on any of the 4 aircraft. Heading south toward Denver at this time. I am observing armed weapons pylons on all 4. I can positively identify AGM-114 Hellfire missiles. Minimum 6 Hellfires total across the 4 aircraft. These are armed. Repeat, all 4 are armed. The controller's response came after a brief pause. Phantom, say again, you are confirming armed Hellfires on all 4 contacts. Affirm. Weapons are present on all 4 pylons. Aircraft are on attack profile. Denver is approximately 5 minutes ahead of their current position. There was a longer pause. Jordan knew what was happening on the other end of that frequency without being able to hear it. A chain of authorizations moving upward through military command at extraordinary speed. From Peterson to NORAD. From NORAD to the Secretary of Defense. Possibly beyond that. The rules of engagement required explicit authorization before any weapons could be fired, and that authorization had to come from someone with the legal authority to grant it. That process, even in an emergency, took time. Every second of that time was a second those drones spent getting closer to downtown Denver. 12 seconds passed. Then a different voice came onto the frequency. It was deeper and calmer than the controller's voice, and it carried the absolute certainty of someone who had spent decades making hard decisions under pressure. Phantom, this is General Torres, NORAD. You are authorized weapons free. I am authorizing you to engage all 4 contacts. Eliminate the threat. You have weapons free authorization right now. Do you copy? Jordan said, Phantom copies. Weapons free. Engaging now. She designated the lead contact. The targeting system on the F-22 acknowledged the lock with a clear and steady tone in her helmet. She said, Fox 3. She pressed the trigger. The AIM-120 AMRAAM left the aircraft on a streak of white smoke, its own active radar seeker guiding it independently toward the target. The lead drone had no radar warning system. It had no electronic countermeasures. It had no pilot inside it with reflexes and instincts and the ability to react to an unexpected threat. It flew in a perfectly straight line, exactly as it had been programmed to do, and the missile found it with complete certainty. The explosion was a bright orange burst, there and then gone, leaving a trail of falling debris. Jordan said, Splash 1. She was already moving her targeting system to the second contact. Fox 3. The second missile flew true. Another explosion. Another brief flash against the Colorado sky. Splash 2. The remaining 2 drones broke. Not intelligently, not in the way a human pilot would break when they realized they were under attack, but in the programmed and mechanical way of autonomous systems that had been told to execute an evasion sequence when the lead aircraft was lost from their formation. The maneuvers were slow and predictable. They had been designed to defeat older or slower threats. They had not been designed to defeat an F-22 Raptor flown by a pilot with 6 years in type and a call sign she had earned by being impossible to anticipate. Jordan accelerated and repositioned. She cut off the angle to the third drone and was in a firing solution before the drone's evasion sequence had managed to change its heading by more than a few degrees. She locked it and fired. Fox 3. Splash 3. The fourth drone turned south and tried to run, extending away from the engagement at the best speed its turboprop engine could produce. It was not fast enough. Jordan was already anticipating the move before it fully developed, placing her aircraft in the geometry that would give her a clean shot regardless of where the drone attempted to go. She locked it at 6 miles and fired the last missile. Fox 3. The fourth explosion was smaller than the first, at a greater distance, a brief bright point against the brown and gray landscape below. Splash 4. Control, all 4 threats are eliminated. No further contacts on radar. Denver is clear. There was a pause on the frequency. A few seconds of radio silence. Then General Torres's voice came back on. Outstanding work, Phantom. Return to Peterson at your discretion. You just saved a lot of people down there. Jordan turned the aircraft south and started a long, slow descent back toward Colorado Springs. The adrenaline that had carried her through the engagement was receding now, pulling back like a tide going out, leaving behind a heavy and specific tiredness that she recognized from other high-intensity missions. It was the weight that settled in once the danger was over and the body realized it no longer needed to be operating at maximum output. She ran through her post-engagement checks with automatic precision. Aircraft status. Fuel. Weapons inventory. Everything was in order. The F-22 had performed without any issues. 4 missiles fired. 4 targets eliminated. The entire engagement from first shot to last impact had taken less than 2 minutes. The landing at Peterson was smooth. She rolled out on the runway and turned off onto the secure taxiway and taxied back to the ramp where she had launched from not long before. She shut down the engines and sat in the cockpit for a moment after the noise faded, in the specific silence that follows the shutdown of powerful engines. Cooling metal made small sounds. Wind moved across the canopy. Below her on the ramp, ground crew were already moving toward the aircraft. General Michael Torres was standing on the tarmac when Jordan climbed down from the aircraft. He was a tall man in his late 50s, 3 stars on his collar, the kind of composed and direct bearing that came from decades of command positions. He looked at Jordan as she came down the boarding ladder, still in her flight suit, helmet tucked under her arm. Then he raised his hand in a formal military salute. Jordan returned the salute. Torres said, "Captain Hayes. Those 4 drones were 4 minutes from the Denver downtown area when your last missile hit the target. Payload analysis from the recovered debris in the field is still being conducted, but preliminary assessment indicates that 6 Hellfire strikes in a concentrated urban area could have caused mass casualties and destroyed multiple city blocks. We do not yet know who launched them or from where. That investigation is being run right now by multiple agencies. But you stopped them. You went from a commercial passenger seat to an armed F-22 and you went up there and you stopped them." Jordan said, "Just doing my job, sir." Torres shook his head slowly. "You were on leave, Captain. You were on a personal trip to meet your nephew. You were wearing joggers. Most people, in your position, would have needed time to adjust to a situation like that. You needed about 40 seconds. Then you were ready. That is not just the job. That is something beyond the job." Jordan did not have an answer for that. She looked at the F-22 being surrounded by maintenance personnel beginning their post-flight checks, and she said nothing. She was taken to the base operations building, given coffee, and sat in a quiet room while the situation was debriefed around her. Officers came and went. Maps were spread on tables. Radar recordings were reviewed. The debris fields from the 4 destroyed drones were being plotted on Colorado terrain maps by people with laptops and satellite communications. Jordan answered every question she was asked, clearly and precisely, and when she was not being asked questions she sat in her chair and drank her coffee and waited. She had changed back out of the flight suit. She was in her joggers and gray pullover again, exactly as she had looked when she boarded the JetBlue flight in Boston that morning. Approximately 2 hours after Jordan had left the aircraft, JetBlue Flight 237 was still sitting on the Peterson ramp. The passengers had been given refreshments and updates. The airline had coordinated with base operations to provide ground power and support. Most passengers had settled back into the resigned and patient mode of people who have accepted an unexpected delay and are simply waiting for it to end. When Jordan walked back across the ramp, up the air stairs, and through the forward door of the aircraft, she was not expecting anything in particular. She was tired. She was thinking about San Diego and her sister and the nephew she had not yet met. She stepped through the door and looked down the aisle. Every person in the cabin rose from their seat. All of them. Every passenger who could stand. They rose at almost the same moment, and the sound of applause filled the interior of the A321 from the front row to the last, bouncing off the walls and the ceiling in a way that was louder than such a confined space had any right to produce. Marcus was applauding near the galley. The other flight attendants were applauding. Captain Garcia had come out of the flight deck and was standing near the forward bulkhead, clapping along with everyone else. Even the small child who had been crying during the diversion announcement was sitting on her mother's lap looking at Jordan with large and curious eyes, clapping her own small hands together without understanding why but knowing that it was the thing everyone was doing. Jordan walked down the aisle to her seat. She stood beside it for a moment and looked at the faces around her. Strangers. All of them strangers who had shared an extraordinary hour with her without any of them choosing it. She nodded once, a simple and direct acknowledgement, and sat down. The man in the business suit, the one who had said she looked like she came from a yoga class, the one who had sat back down in complete silence when the F-22 rolled outside the window, leaned forward from his seat across the aisle. He spoke quietly, not performing for anyone around him. "Ma'am. I owe you an apology. A significant one. I had no idea. None of us had any idea. What you did today, going up there and doing whatever you did, I don't have the right words for it. I'm sorry for what I said. And thank you." Jordan looked at him. "You didn't need to know. That's really the whole point." He nodded slowly, as though that answer had explained something he had been trying to understand since the moment the Raptors appeared outside the windows. The aircraft pushed back 30 minutes later and departed Peterson Air Force Base for the continuation of its original route to San Diego. The rest of the flight was quiet and uneventful. Jordan put her earbuds back in. She was exhausted in a way that went deeper than ordinary tiredness, the specific kind of depletion that follows maximum mental and physical intensity, the kind that only real rest can address. She closed her eyes. The cabin was dim and people around her were asleep or watching their screens or looking out the windows at the sky getting darker toward the west. Jordan slept. She arrived in San Diego in the early evening, 2 hours behind the original schedule. Her sister was waiting at the arrival's exit, holding a baby in a blue blanket. The baby was asleep against her shoulder, his face small and completely peaceful. Jordan stopped walking when she saw them, and something in her expression changed, not dramatically, not in a way that the people walking around her would have noticed, but in the way that happens when a person who has been carrying a great deal of weight finally sets some of it down. She walked to her sister and her sister said, "Jordan. Finally. Here he is." Jordan held the baby. He stirred slightly but did not wake. She stood in the arrivals hall for a long moment, holding a sleeping infant, wearing joggers and a gray pullover, looking like any other tired traveler who had just come off a long flight after a delayed day. Which, in one sense, was exactly what she was. In the days that followed, the investigation into the origin of the 4 armed drones was conducted by a joint task force that included personnel from NORAD, the FBI, the Department of Homeland Security, and the Defense Intelligence Agency. The debris from the 4 destroyed UAVs was spread across a wide area of eastern Colorado farmland, and recovery teams worked through the night and into the following days collecting fragments and cataloging everything they found. What they assembled from the wreckage told a partial story. The drones had been built using commercially available components in combination with military-grade modifications that suggested a level of technical sophistication beyond what any ordinary group could have assembled. The Hellfire missiles were confirmed as genuine military ordnance, which meant they had been diverted from an existing inventory somewhere in the supply chain. The investigation would continue for months, and Jordan would be interviewed several more times by investigators who needed her precise account of what she had observed during the intercept. She gave them everything she could with complete accuracy. She described the airframe configurations, the weapons pylons, the altitude and heading, the evasion sequences the drones executed after the first 2 were destroyed, and the position of every missile she fired. Her observations were consistent with the physical evidence recovered from the debris fields, and the investigators noted in their reports that her account was among the most detailed and reliable they had received from any witness or participant in the event. Peterson Air Force Base formally commended Jordan in a closed ceremony that took place about 10 days after the incident. General Torres was there, along with the commanding officer of the 27th Fighter Squadron, who had flown out specifically to be present. Jordan sat in a chair in a conference room and listened to people describe what she had done in the kind of formal military language that turns extraordinary events into measured official language. She accepted the commendation with the same quiet composure she brought to everything else. She shook hands. She answered the questions that were asked of her. When it was over, she walked back to her accommodations on the base, packed her bag, and caught the next available flight to San Diego to finish the leave she had not yet completed. 3 weeks later, the story became public. These things always do eventually. A combination of passenger accounts, video footage that passengers had recorded on their phones and posted without realizing what they had captured, and a defense journalist's public records request produced enough of the picture that major media organizations began making calls. The Air Force declined to comment on operational specifics. NORAD confirmed only that a security event over Colorado had been successfully addressed. JetBlue confirmed the diversion. But the passengers who had been there talked, and there were 187 of them. The footage of the F-22 executing its barrel roll outside the cabin window spread across the internet with a speed that said something about what people recognize as genuinely extraordinary. The story ran in every major outlet. Fighter pilot activated mid-flight on commercial airliner, eliminates armed drone threat over Colorado. Jordan gave one interview. She chose 60 minutes. She sat in a quiet room in a location that was not disclosed and answered questions for approximately 40 minutes, of which about 12 minutes were broadcast. The interviewer asked her what it felt like to be recalled to active duty while sitting on a commercial flight in civilian clothes. Jordan said, "Surreal is probably the right word. 1 minute I am trying to fall asleep to a playlist I put together specifically so I could stop thinking about work. The next minute I am walking to the flight deck to convince a captain to divert his aircraft to a military base. It does not feel like a movie while it is happening. Movies are much cleaner than real life. In reality it is just a sequence of tasks, and you go through them one at a time, and you do not stop to think about how strange the overall situation is until it is over." The interviewer asked whether she had been frightened during the engagement. Jordan thought about that for a moment before she answered. She said, "Yes. When I got close enough to visually confirm that those UAVs were carrying live Hellfire missiles, and I understood where they were going and what they were going to do when they got there, I was frightened." I think that is an honest answer. Anyone who tells you there is no fear in situations like that is either not being honest or has never actually been in one. Fear is fine. Fear is information. It tells you that the situation is real and the stakes are real. And when the stakes are real, your training takes over. You have rehearsed for exactly this kind of situation so many times that your body and your hands and your eyes know what to do even while your mind is still catching up to what it is seeing. Fear and training exist at the same time. Training wins. The interviewer asked what she wanted people to understand. Jordan looked slightly past the camera, the way people do when they are choosing words with care. She said, "There are people who are always watching. Always ready. You do not see them. You do not know their names. You have no idea what they do. They are sitting next to you on commercial flights. They are in line at the grocery store behind you. They are completely ordinary-looking people who are carrying something that most people never carry, and they do it quietly, without looking for recognition, without needing anyone to know. I am one of those people. There are thousands more just like me. And none of us do it for the interviews or the applause or the video footage. We do it because it is the job, and the job matters more than we can usually explain." The interviewer asked for her name and her call sign and what she flew. Jordan looked directly at the camera. She said, "I am Captain Jordan Hayes. My call sign is Phantom. I fly F-22 Raptors for the United States Air Force. I protect American airspace. And sometimes I do that after being recalled off a commercial flight while wearing joggers and borrowing a jet from Peterson Air Force Base in Colorado Springs." She paused. For the record, the joggers were very comfortable. I have no complaints about the joggers. The clip of that last answer was viewed 40 million times in the first week it was online. Jordan did not see any of it. She was in San Diego, asleep on her sister's couch, with a 3-week-old baby on her chest and the television off and her government phone in the other room charging. She had 8 more days of leave remaining. She planned to use every single one of them.